tonight on Reporting Scotland. As another Lib Dem MP faces questions about election spending, the party's leader says their expenses are above reproach. Nicola Sturgeon says she would have given the SNP a different name when it was founded because of the negative connotations of nationalism. There's a call for a fatal accident inquiry into the deaths of these 3 people who all died at a water-filled quarry in Fife. After the devastating fire at Scotland's biggest market, traders begin to return to work as it partially reopens.
We've only got about 10% of the produce that we would normally have, but all our suppliers, customers have all been on saying that they'll be with us to support us all the way through it.
And later in the programme, we catch up with Doddy Weir, the former rugby international who was diagnosed with motor neuron disease earlier this year. Good evening. The UK Liberal Democrat leader has stepped into the row of his party's election expenses. The SNP say there are serious questions to be answered after criticising a second Scottish MP's accounting practices. Money was apportioned to what they call national spending. But speaking in Edinburgh, Sir Vince Cable said the expenses were entirely above reproach. Here's our political correspondent, Andrew Kerr.
A visit to Scotland's capital for the UK Liberal Democrat leader. He's been attending the book festival, but the stories here about the party's election expenses have not made pleasant reading. The focus today on the Edinburgh West MP Christine Jardine. Along with some colleagues, she omitted some spending in her election return and apportioned it to national spending rather than on the local campaign. The SNP have complained, but Miss Jardine, who's on holiday, says it's all above board.
This is nothing more than an exercise in reputational damage by the SNP because they lost the seat. We have followed the rules, the guidance and the advice that we were given by the Electoral Commission.
Here's the detail. Miss Jardine's national spend was just over £3,000. Her East Dunbartonshire colleague allocated £4,000 to national spending and also had £2,700 of undelivered material that wasn't included in her total. The North East Fife candidate chose to put £1,800 on national spending. And in June, the Lib Dem MSP Alex Coe-Hamilton was reported to prosecutors for his spending in the Holyrood election last year. He denies any wrongdoing. The UK leader says they've followed the rules in every case.
It's entirely above reproach. The party has followed the guidance given by the Electoral Commission about how you apportion these expenses, and it appears to be absolutely and completely all right. If people have a complaint, then there are avenues to make those complaints in, but there's absolutely nothing to explain and nothing to apologise for.
So the UK Liberal Democrat leader defending his MPs and candidates, but the SNP aren't so sure.
There seems to be a patterning that's emerging day by day. We're uncovering some really significant stories just about what's been happening, about Liberal Democrats losing election materials, about defining candidate expenditure as national expenditure, and I think there's a whole series of questions that now need to be answered properly by the Liberal Democrats about what's been going on in these key constituencies.
Election expenses are very much in the public's mind after the Conservative MP Craig McKinlay, along with 2 party colleagues, was charged with filing false election expenses in South Thanet. They deny the charges. The Lib Dems and the SNP fought tough battles in the 2017 election, and now a bitter war of words continues, although no complaints have been made to the police. Andrew Kerr, Reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has said she would change the name of her party if she could. Speaking at the Edinburgh Book Festival, the SNP leader said the connotations of nationalism were often hugely problematic for her party. With more, our political correspondent Nick Eardley.
Supporters of Scottish independence in 2014. Nationalists, Nicola Sturgeon says, who prided themselves on being inclusive. Fundamentally different, she believes, from other nationalist movements. Some of whom have hit the headlines in recent weeks, like in Charlottesville, where violent clashes broke out, far-right protesters dubbed white nationalists, and in Turkey, where the president has been accused of stoking nationalist flames, home to author Elif Shafak.
The word nationalism is, for me personally, has a very negative meaning, because I've seen how ugly it can get. Can nationalism ever be benign?
The word is difficult.
And this answer from the First Minister on her own party.
If I could turn the clock back, 90 years to the establishment of my party and choose its name all over again, I wouldn't choose the name it's got just now. I would call it something other than the Scottish National Party.
That won't happen now. Ms Sturgeon says it would be too complicated, and instead she hopes actions can show a difference.
What those of us who do support Scottish independence are all about could not be further removed from some of what you would recognise as nationalism in other parts of the world.
Political opponents say nationalism will always be divisive, but this commentator says there are different types.
I mean, historically and internationally, nationalism undoubtedly has negative connotations, but of course there are different sorts of nationalism. I think even critics of Scottish nationalism and independence would accept that Scottish nationalism is not, even remotely comparable to some of the worst varieties.
A contested, at times controversial word, one unlikely to disappear from Scottish politics anytime soon. Nick Eddy, reporting Scotland.
It's been described by locals as Scotland's most dangerous quarry, claiming the lives of 4 people, 3 of them in just the last 3 years. Trading has begun again at the Blochairn fruit market in Glasgow, which was extensively damaged by fire yesterday. A police complaints investigation has criticised the way Police Scotland dealt with reports of concern for a vulnerable woman in Dumfries. A 17-year-old who was convicted of killing another teenager by knifing him in the groin has been detained for 9 years. The Scotland rugby legend Doddy Weir has been in Edinburgh promoting a fun run for MND Scotland. Katrina Matthew, the sole Scot in the European Solheim Cup team, has been in action in the opening session of play. Aberdeen have been fined for crowd trouble during the club's Europa League tie against Apollon Limassol in Cyprus earlier this month. The biggest names in badminton compete in Glasgow next week as the city hosts the World Championships. A 23-year-old from Invergordon is vying to claim his place as one of the strongest men in the world. An 84-year-old lone yachtsman who lost his boat in the middle of the North Sea nearly 2 years ago has returned to Shetland for another attempt to sail to Norway.